Good morning, welcome to Furry and Spoilt. This morning I'm going to talk to you about walking your dogs in winter. So the winter in the UK, I mean, as things go, it's not actually terrible, but it can get really quite cold. And mornings like now, I start my walk in the absolute pitch black. So it's got a little bit lighter now, but I definitely do start it in the pitch black for about a month. And so there's just various things that I carry with me, things that I have to do that are different to the rest of the year, and I'll just go through them with you. Okay, so these are the lights that we use. So I use this one here and I just hang it around my lead. It's actually a lead extension light, but I prefer to just hang it around the handle of my lead. And then you see that we've got Harry and Albert over here, and they've just got little lights on their leads. Now it doesn't look like an awful lot because it's actually getting a little bit lighter, but when it's pitch black you can see these lights really clearly, and it means that other dog walkers can see our dogs and traffic can see us as well. If it gets really cold, and in the UK, to be honest, it doesn't really get that cold. So recently we've had a time when it was like -6, -10, and there was snow on the ground for a couple of weeks, and it was really just too cold to walk them. So what I did was, they were just getting too cold even with coats on. So what I did was I just took them for a very short walk, but I put them in the car and took them for a drive, and they were quite happy with that. I mean, it's not an ideal situation because obviously they're not getting the exercise, but they are getting the stimulation, and it was just so cold. I think there was, like, you know, the wind was like -15 or something. It was really, really cold. And for in the UK, that's just too cold for them because we're just not used to it. Obviously, your dog may be used to those sort of temperatures, and you'll have your own temperatures when it's just too cold. But I know for us, that was too cold. And so I just popped him in the car, took him for a drive. Something to bear in mind is that if you're walking your dogs in the snow and the ice, there might be salt on the paths and the roads, and that can really irritate their paws badly. So what I do when I get back from those walks is I just either with a wet flannel wipe their paws down, or dunk them into like a bowl of water. If you've got a dog that doesn't like his paws being touched, then what you could do is, like with Humps here, he's not great with his back paws being touched. Fine with his front, but not great with his back. So what I do is I put a wet towel down in the doorway that he has to walk through. And so to get into the room, he has to walk on the wet towel. And that just, I mean, not an awful lot, but it just takes the salt off their paws. The other thing to think about with the salt is that it's never ideal to let a dog lick out of a puddle, just because you don't know what's in it. It's just not ideal. But if they ever do, it's something that you let your dog do, be aware that in the winter there might be salt in that water, so that'll make them sick. So, but like I said, it's not a good idea to let dogs drink out of puddles. That can be all sorts of problems from that. So that's just something to bear in mind. And the other thing that I do is, and I do this all year round, I just have a pile of old towels, like this pile down here, and it's just for dogs. And then if I get back from a walk and they're wet, then I just dry them off with them. You know, again, as with so much dog stuff, you can get all sorts of fancy ones that are supposed to absorb more water and all of that, but I just use old towels and just wash them, just dry them down with that, and it really helps. And the other thing I was going to say about was, if you have got them out in the snow, watch, because what can happen is that, like, the snow can stick to their fur in big balls, and it almost becomes like a mat, and then they can't walk sometimes because it's matted their fur together. And even when you get home, those if they've got snow, like little snowballs on their fur, on their legs, it can take a surprisingly long time to melt. I've found that Humps here is not too bad for that kind of thing. We've only had him in the snow once, and he didn't really get it at all. But my other two dogs, because they got curly fur, especially Albert, because he's got a Bichon Frise mix in him, because he's got a curly fur, that was really bad. The snow really used to stick to it and clump. And so if that happens, I just used to, you know, just what I actually used to do is, because it's quite hard to get them off, because you can't really pull them off because it hurts them, and you can't melt them. So, and what I used to do was just like when they were settled down on the sofa, if they still had the lumps of snow on them, then I would just put like a blanket over their back legs and make sure the room's nice and warm, but not too warm. And it would just melt quite quickly then. But it's surprising how you'd think once you got in the house, the snow would melt, but because it gets sort of trapped into the fur, it does take a bit longer. And it's not always, you don't always notice it. And the other thing is that can happen on the paws. So you could be out on the walk and they start walking funny or don't want to walk at all. And it could be because these lumps of snow and ice have got on into their paws, and it makes it really hard for them to walk. So just other things to consider. Often in the winter, my dogs will wear coats. There is such a selection of dog coats out there. So what I always have is I have a raincoat and then what I call a snow coat. So the raincoat is thinner. It's really, really thin actually. It's not about particularly keeping them warm. It's just about keeping them dry. I don't worry so much about that in the summer, but sometimes in the winter, if it's just raining day after day after day. Also, in the winter, their coats are thicker. I always keep their coats a bit longer for them in the winter. And so if they get wet, it's just miserable. So they have their raincoat, and then they have, and that's just thin. And then they have their snow coat, which is thicker. And that is about keeping them warm when it's cold. I'll pop a picture up here. You can see them with their winter coats on. The other thing with coats is you're like, so Harry, you know, if you know my videos well, you'll know that he just in the winter he's always under his blanket. He loves to be warm, whereas my other two dogs really aren't that bothered. And so you just got to judge whether or not you think, you know, your dog needs a coat or not. Not all dogs will. Some dogs in your pack will, some dogs won't. So you just got to make that decision. The other thing, I always carry a torch with me. Now that isn't always easy. So we've got 3 dogs. Me and my husband walk them. I walk 2, he walks 1. So it isn't always easy, but it is just a good idea. And he's so cozy under that blanket. It's just a good idea to have a torch with you. And I use that mainly when I'm first coming out of the garden, just so that I can see up and down the road who's about and whatnot. But that is definitely something. And also, if you're going to be when they've gone to the toilet, to be picking that up, you will need a torch because you'll never find it otherwise. So I always have a torch for that. Let me just check my notes, but I think that's everything I do for my winter walks. Yeah, it is. That's what I do in the winter. If you've got any tips that you do, any things that you do that I haven't mentioned, you know, please, as always, pop them into comments. So thank you very much for watching. Have a great day. I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.